This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Today I want to talk to you about something that I refer to as the trap of success. Now, early in my career, I had the joy, the benefit, the euphoria of having some early success. Now, I've had a lot of failures in my career too, but early in my career, I had a handful of successes, some small, some medium, and early on in my career, I had one big win. And what I'll tell you is when you get that taste of success, when you get that recognition, when you get the press coverage and you're on major newspapers, and at one point I was on, major national radio and TV, all this goes to your head and you think it's about you. You think it's something that you know, something you do, something you have inherently inside of you that will lead to you being able to have repeatable success. Now, everybody's motivation is to be repeatable, right? You want to get that win, you want to build that great product, and then the value you feel you deliver to your company organization is, look, I'm going to do you a second product that's going to be great. I'm going to give you a third product and a fourth product and a fifth product. And let me tell you, the challenge on that is when we think it's about us, or we think about it some magic formula, some magic step process that we know and understand and have done, and that's what causes this repeatable success, that is actually a bad assumption. It's actually a horrible assumption. What we tend to see happening is when someone experiences success, and it can be someone, a team, a company, soon as they get that taste of success, they immediately go and become very conservative. Conservative towards the approach of, hey, if I repeat and do exactly what I did before, don't vary, if I basically follow the cookie cutter approach to do exactly what I did to make that product successful, I'll make this product successful. And that rarely, if ever, happens. You can look at companies out there that had big, huge successes, and then they were one-hit wonders. They couldn't get a second product out the door. What I have seen, when you tear apart and really look at products that have been highly successful, or teams or individuals that have been highly successful, it's those organizations that fight that urge to be conservative. They fight the urge to lock down and move into playing a defensive mode. And if you're out there and you're building a brand new product, you're a new startup, you've got nothing to lose, you're a maverick. You're out there breaking the rules. You're out there doing things in ways and approaches that nobody else has thought of. But as soon as you've thought of it, you think of it as being the reason why you're successful, versus the real reason why you're successful was you were willing to throw out the rule book. You were willing to get rid of doing it the way you've always done it and go after and be aggressive. Now, in my case, my big one early success was a product called PC Boot. We were a small startup company. We were funded by a venture capital firm in Chicago called Frontneck Venture Capital. And it was a company that was focused on biometric security. It was a company called ThumbScan. Now, as with all startup companies, particularly technologies such as this is in the mid to late 80s, using optics, before CCD camera elements had even been invented yet. I mean, we were pushing the envelope in a lot of different technology ranges. But there was competition. There was, iris scanning and password protection. It was all around computing security in the late 80s. So what did we do? In order to survive, we acquired the assets of a company called Gordian Systems that had gone bankrupt. Now, Gordian had developed what is called this token security device, kind of those devices that give you a one-time use digital password. You type in the password that appears on the key, and off you go. Gordian was the first company to invent this. Their tokens had been approved by NSA and CIA and Department of Defense, and governments around the world were using these tokens. But it's not a very big market in the late 80s, hard to survive. So I was given a task by the CEO that says, go out there, see what assets Gordian has, and you need to create a product that you can ship within 60 days that can bring us in revenue using only the assets that are in that warehouse. Deliver a product in 60 days that can generate us some revenue. We need revenue to keep the business afloat till we can finish the main product, this product called ThumbScan. So talk about being motivated and really wanting to be aggressive and being a maverick. We had to. 3 of us went out there. We sat in this dingy, grimy, nasty warehouse right off of 101 in Silicon Valley. We could only use the assets. We didn't have any money to go buy for, any new hardware production or anything like that. We could only use the assets that Gordian had already procured and was the assets as part of the bankruptcy. So we went at it. We wrote bunches of software. We got something basically up and running, and we launched this product called PC Boot. Now, PC Boot went on to win Product of the Year that year at the Comdex show in Las Vegas. Talk about a shocker. And then getting all this recognition and press coverage and pats on the back and all of that. And guess what happened? We fell into that trap of success. We're like, woohoo! We are really, really smart. We've got this figured out. We can repeat this. We're going to dominate. And we fell into the trap, and we went very conservative, because now all of a sudden, with the success we had everybody coming after us with variations of products and services similar to it at a cheaper price and different features and functions. We became the target. And we felt that the best way to survive was to go conservative. We're going to recreate and define a very well-defined process. The same process we did to put the first version out, we'll use that exact same steps to put version 2 out, and we'll be guaranteed success. And guess what? Version 2, total bust. Version 3, a little bit better, but by that time, cash was gone. This is late 80s, the economic downturn. Couldn't raise any more venture capital dollars. ThumbScan eventually got acquired itself from a company called Cominvest AB out of Stockholm, Sweden in the late 80s. But when I look back and I really take a hard look at what did we do right and what did we do wrong? Well, what did we do right? Look, we were in a desperate situation. ThumbScan was not going to survive if we didn't generate revenue. We had an asset pool, and we were given a BHAG, that bold, hairy, audacious goal to go out, generate a product, generate revenue with just the assets that were in this nasty warehouse in Silicon Valley. We had to be mavericks. We couldn't be conventional. We couldn't follow the processes that every other company goes when thinking about building and launching a new product. We couldn't be conservative. We had to be that maverick. We had a very, very compressed time frame. We couldn't have any new hardware built. We could only use the hardware that already existed. Basically, we were left with having to do everything in software as much as possible to create this product. We built it, we launched it, and we got a big win out of it. But so how do you create that success again? You can't recreate that maverick condition that led to the success of that product, PC Boot. And so the challenge is okay, how do you avoid this trap of success? How do you avoid thinking that, okay, I got this success, now my position and my role is to become ultra conservative. Move into a defensive mode, defend yourself against the competition coming in, and think to yourself that you can use the same process that you used for the first version to produce the next version. You can't do it. That process, that approach, fundamentally does not work. Believe me, because I tried it. I thought that because I had that success early on, that this is what was going to lead me to success going into version 2, version 3. And it total was a bomb. So I fell into this trap of success. And what we're going to talk about today is how to avoid this trap of success. And what does it really take to motivate individuals, teams, entire organizations to not fall into that trap, but to focus on what does it really take for innovation success. So don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick commercial break. And when we come back, we're going to pick up this conversation on avoiding the trap of success. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. But before we hop into the show, I want to give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, and that sponsor is Zoom. Now, Zoom is a tool that we've been using for almost 2 years to keep our teams connected. And it's a great tool, both video, audio, and some of the best collaboration technologies I've seen out there. And I use this tool literally every day. And I'm hearing from listeners of the show, of those of you who've been trying out Zoom, using it with your brainstorming sessions. So being able to do virtual brainstorming with your team scattered out all over, or just being able to stay connected with previous coworkers. One is a virtual sports league, and they get together on Zoom to have their conversations. Zoom is a tool that allows for you to create that community, stay connected, be collaborative, and work better together. So check it out. Hop on over to killerinnovations.com/Zoom and check it out. We're not the only ones. Gartner now has rated it as one of the top video collaboration tools out there. So check it out, killerinnovations.com/Zoom, and get your free account today. Now, when it comes to the trap of success, one of the biggest, I don't know if I want to call it motivators, but one of the biggest approaches to getting a team focused on what they need to do to win is by positioning them against their competitors. Pushing yourself against a competitor, something that you can easily wrap your arms around and target, is one of those ways of forcing you to not fall into the trap of doing it the old way. You have to find new ways to go win that business. You have something to aim for. Now, when I was CTO at HP, when I first became the CTO at HP, one of the first requests that I got from the leadership team at HP was the turnaround in the PC business. Now, when I started, the PC business at HP was number 3, number 4 in the world in market share, and was losing about $1.5 billion in revenue. That's right, losing $1.5 billion a year in revenue. The PC business is an incredibly hard business. You're getting 3, maybe 4% operating profit. The analogy that I put out to people is the PC business is kind of like running in front of a steamroller and picking up as many pennies as you can before you get crushed. Now, the challenge is how do you take a PC business like that, losing $1.5 billion, number 3, number 4, in some cases, depending on the geography, number 5 in market share, and how do you turn it to become number 1? Now, there was a lot of things going on in the marketplace at that point, but there were some clear, leaders. Dell was a very, very strong competitor in the marketplace. IBM/Lenovo was an incredibly strong competitor in the marketplace. In the case of the PC business, Apple never really been a big competitor from a market share or sheer size perspective. But great from the standpoint of features and functions and overall customer satisfaction and fan base, product love from the customer base. So you take a look at all of that. What is it going to take for HP to really become number one? Well, it required that at HP we had to throw everything out. We could not do it the same way we'd always done it. We couldn't follow the same cycles of introducing products, or the same way that we would validate feature sets, or the same way we would approach how we designed our products. So if you recall back then, we started with a new approach called the PC is personal again. It was an ad campaign to recognize that you were more likely to hand somebody your wallet than you were to hand somebody your PC. Everything on your PC was highly personal, highly private. Everything you did, your browser history and everything was on that PC. You were not going to share that. And so we shifted to a design focus strategy. You know, the old joke is if you wanted to buy, how did HP end up with, you know, all of the at least the business computers all were gray? Well, the joke inside of HP is we went out and did a focus group. 50% of the customers said they wanted black. 50% of the customers said they wanted it to be white. So we chose gray because that way we thought we could make everybody happy. It was these set of compromises, and compromises do not work. And so we ended up throwing out the entire rule book inside of HP of how we designed, how we manufactured, how we shipped, how we supported. And we just went after the competition, all guns blazing. Now, it took a number of years, right? So we went from number 3, number 4 in the market to becoming number 1 worldwide, every product category, every geography. We went to number 1, and we did it in 3 years. That's right, 3 years. We went from number 3, number 4, losing $1.5 billion to making $3 billion in revenue on the profit side, and doing that in a 3-year time frame. Unheard of. But it required an enormous amount of support in the marketplace. It required that we had to completely throw out the rule book on how we did everything. Everything from specifying parts to how we do the design to packaging design. I could tell you stories about how much time we spent on designing of boxes and packages. And we also did some acquisitions. I led the acquisition of Voodoo PC, which was at that time the premier gaming PC company out of Calgary. Raul Sood and that team, phenomenal team. They brought us in a sense of passion and desire and design in those products that really ignited even more passion. And even today, you can go over to HP and take a look at products that come from what is still referred to as the Voodoo DNA. And so, how do you do this? How do you do this within your organization? Find that competition. Be willing to throw the rule book out. Be willing to give that bold BHAG of you're going to go from number 4 in the market to number 1 in every market, every geography, and every category. And nothing less will be accepted. If you become number 1 like we did at HP, then you become the target. You need to go off and find another target. You cannot rest on your laurels. You cannot rest on becoming conservative. You have to win. Or you have to redefine the market that you are going to compete in. So again, competition plays a key role to avoid yourself of getting caught in this trap of success. You get these little tastes of success, big wins, one big motivator for those teams. Clearly define the competition, clearly define that BHAG, and accept nothing less than success. So, we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to continue on our conversation about how to avoid this trap of success. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing, killer innovation.
Before we hop back into this show, I want to do a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, which happens to be HP. Now, I was the CTO at HP, and many of you are going to say, whoa, Phil, you're biased. You're part of it. Yes, I retired at the end of 11 after 10 great years at a great company. I still believe strongly in the products and services, still have a strong connection with the leadership team there, and they are doing some great things. One of the focus areas that HP is focusing on here most recently is privacy and security. They've got some videos over there. You should go over and take a look at them over at hp.com that shows the kind of information that stays around inside of your office copiers that you would absolutely be shocked about. You go in and you just, you think you're Xeroxing, some paperwork for your closing on your house, and you do it at the office because that's where the copier's at. Copies of that information is sitting in those printers if they're not HP printers. So think about that. Check it out. Go over to hp.com. See what they're doing in security and privacy. One of the big areas that they're focused on right now, and one that I greatly appreciate given the threats that we're seeing out there today for our personal and private information. So check it out. You can hop on over to hp.com. If you want to see specifically the technologies that HP is working with us on with regards to the studio and the show, etc., you can go over to killerinnovations.com/HP and check that out. Now, in the last segment, we talked about finding the competition, typically the competition outside your organization, the competitor that you really hate and the one that you're really going to go after and crush. And we used HP as an example, talking about taking HP from number 3 or number 4 market share to number 1 market share. What I want to talk about today is you can create kind of that same sense of competition inside of your organization, what we call creating team competition, where you're constantly pushing and challenging each other to do better, to achieve success, and do it in such a way that the whole organization wins. Now, some of you are going to say, well, Phil, that kind of counter to teamwork. Well, the example I'm going to use is Pixar versus Disney animation. When Pixar was acquired by Disney, there was the conscious decision by the Pixar management team to not merge those two organizations together. Keep them separate. Keep Pixar team up in Northern California, the Disney Animation Studios down in Burbank, and let them keep going. Well, one is to challenge each other. Nobody likes to be the team that's kind of the stepchild, the one that's not quite keeping up with another part of the organization. Now, to do this, though, what Pixar and Disney did is they actually established some rules, right? They kept the teams separate. Each were working on their own films, Zootopia versus, Cars 3 versus, all of the things that have been coming out in the last couple of years. But to make this work, there has to be some clear ground rules. You're using competition, but not competition from outside the company. You're using competition inside as a team motivator. So what are some of the rules that Disney and Pixar put in place? Number 1, the studios would not be allowed to borrow each other's resources when they got into a pinch. Each studio had to be self-sufficient. If you got into a jam, you couldn't go pluck out that expert in this one little widget area to come bail you out. You had to build up a team, you had to build up your culture, and you had to be self-sufficient. Number 2, they wouldn't be able to take over each other's projects. So if one of the studios had a film that was just, going nose down, what they were wanting to avoid is, management stepping in and saying, okay, well, that, film, that new animation from Studio A is bombing, so we're going to bring Studio B in, take it over and save them. Totally demoralizing to the team in Studio A. So they clearly stated that, if a film was going to bomb and wasn't going to make it, it just wasn't going to make it. It was not going to be picked up and thrown across the wall to the other side. Right? So therefore, there wasn't no fear that you were going to get shown up by having somebody else come in and try to save that film. No team would have veto power over another team's movies. The team's management structure, the decisions on scripts, the decision on storylines, animation approach, etc., was all contained within each of the two studios. No team would have the veto power. So it wasn't like Pixar could overrule the Disney animation and say, no, you're not going to go that way, you need to go this way, and veto them. That was not the case. They were independent. Now, why were some of these rules, whether it be, you didn't have the veto, you couldn't take over the team, why were some of these rules put in place? Well, in my perspective, I think these rules were put in place so that each of the teams would not be fearful of the other team. You weren't fearful that the team was going to tell you what to do. You weren't going to be fearful that the team was going to, if you were not quite making it, that your project was going to get ripped away from you and handed over to somebody else that would take it over and therefore get the credit. This all kind of sets up for what I think are the next couple of rules that I think are really important. One is they were on their own to develop their own culture and their own storytelling. Self-contained. It wasn't about, Disney animation trying to copy the way Pixar tells stories, or Pixar trying to copy the way Disney tells stories. They were on their own. And then the most important of the rules, number 5, they would have to openly share their work, and they would have to listen to each other's criticism. That wasn't, okay, we're going to do all of this, we're going to have all these rules, we're creating this competition inside of our organization, and then we're going to keep it to ourselves. And then the first time you're going to see it is, ta-da, at the premiere. Number 5, they would have to openly share their work, and they would have to listen to each other's ideas. Now, it's interesting. There's 2 examples of films, both from Pixar and from Disney, where it's quite evident where the other ones helped each other out. So take the Disney team. The Disney team came in at a critical moment on Pixar's film Inside Out and helped them rethink some of the major plot elements. Now, the result is Inside Out went on to win an Academy Award. So who gets it? Is it Pixar? Is it Disney? When the Pixar team saw a cut of Zootopia, which is a film, I watched it last night with my grandkids, in fact. I love that film. Pixar identified an obvious problem. Throughout the development of that film, the fox had been the protagonist. It had been kind of the problematic character to follow. But the Pixar team said, no, it was the rabbit. Well, think about it. You're changing the entire arc of the storytelling, right? And the result was, it was a major breakthrough for the Disney team, because sometimes we just get so heads down on a project, we need those outside eyes that aren't just critics, but outside eyes that have a vested interest in that success. Last year, Inside Out won the Oscars for the animated. Zootopia went on to win a bunch of awards. And so the end result is these inside competitions, like how Disney and Disney Animation and Pixar got teamed up. We can do the same thing within organizations. But you have to put together the rules, right? They're not allowed to borrow their resources. They're not allowed to take over each other's projects. So you don't have to worry about something being taken away from you. No one has veto power. I don't work for you. You don't work for me. We're completely independent. You have to own and develop your own culture, your own storytelling approaches, how you work on projects. And at the same time, between those teams, you have to openly share the work, and you have to listen to each other's criticisms. All right, you just can't blow them off. Sometimes you need those eyes. So here's competition, to better, right? And competition in the film industry is about, Academy Awards. And both Disney Animation and Pixar, they're on a tear these days. But here's an example of how they structured it in order to generate internal competition to then drive a cycle of repeated success that's noticeable in the marketplace. So With that, we're going to take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to wrap up our conversation on how to avoid getting caught in this trap of success and what does it really mean to be able to drive sustainable success over and over again. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back. Wouldn't life be great if it could be predictable? I sure would love it if I knew exactly what was going to happen today, tomorrow, and the day after. With 5 grandkids, every day is unpredictable. Could I just follow these 5 easy steps and everything will work out? Yeah, it would be nice, but I don't know about you, but I would think that life would get real boring really fast. Life, by nature, is unpredictable. There are an unlimited number of variables and influences and things that happen that are outside of our control that could totally derail any given day. We could be thinking that we've got a plan for a new product, a new service, or a new startup, and that we've got this all worked out and it's going to just follow through and executing. And then all of a sudden, something out of left field comes in, and that's what totally blows it up. But it also creates opportunities for those of us in the innovation game. But as innovators, once we've tasted success, we fall into the same trap as everybody else. Follow these 5 steps and you can repeat success. And it just doesn't work that way. That's what we've been talking about today. We've got lots of examples of where, you maybe have had some success, you tried to repeat, it didn't work. I've got an unlimited number of examples where I thought by simply repeating the 5 steps, I was going to achieve success again. But just as we said, life is unpredictable. So what are we to do? How do we think about success, and how do we make success repeatable and at the same time not fall into the trap of success? The trap of success is once you've tasted it, becoming very conservative, becoming very conscious of repeatability. If I repeat this, I will achieve success. That is the trap of success. The key to having repeatable success, where you can be out there and you can deliver products and services and win, is injecting what I would call creative stress. Creative stress is that stress that forces you to have to throw out everything you know, every methodology, every trick you've used has to be chucked out the window. It's what I refer to as innovating the way you innovate. If you think that following, whether it be the FIRE process, which I teach in my book, and there's probably literally 30 or 40 podcasts in the catalog talking about FIRE, if you think that following the FIRE methodology, that's your magic to innovating, you are wrong, right? It's about adapting. It's about change. It's about making it work inside and to constantly change. If you are using the same approach to innovation this year that you used last year, you're on a path to failure. You're on a path to get sucked into this fallacy of success, this trap that is out there. You have to change. You have to be able to go and try change. Now, the problem is changing on our own, particularly when you've had success, is almost impossible to do. Try to get management to change when things are going really well. Wow, revenue's up to the right, profit numbers are, through the roof, we're doing great. Why should we change? That's exactly the time when you should change, but it doesn't happen. Management won't make that change. But you have to inject what I call this creative stress into your projects. The one way to do that is identify competition. Define a competitor out there that you can get your troops to rally around and focus on. In some cases, you may have to get a little creative in how you describe or define the market, particularly if you are a leader in your segment. You still need to go find this competitor that's going to cause this creative stress. This, I got to throw things out and change if I'm going to win. Otherwise, this competitor is going to eat our lunch. So we have to get out there, and you've got to inject some form of change agent within the organization to try new approaches. Because if we fall into the trap of thinking that we can be repeatable, we fall into this conservative approach, we've fallen into the trap of success. So again, injecting creative stress into the projects is absolutely critical. The other is maybe it's not competition outside. You may inject some of this creative stress by team competition inside your organization, exactly like what Disney and Pixar did. From my experience, once you are on top of the hill, the only direction you are going to go is down unless you find that new hill. So let's wrap up our conversation here. The stress of wanting to repeat success is a trap. You've got to be careful of not thinking that you can just be repeatable. You have to change and go about it in a completely new and different way. So go out there, find that competition, whether it's inside your organization, outside your organization, that will force your teams, your organizations, and even you individually to throw out the rule book and go at it in a completely new and different way. As we wrap up today's show, one way to help you think about all of this, particularly the trap of success and how do you think about innovating the way you're innovating, is to become part of the innovators community. So hop on over to theinnovators.community. theinnovators.community. It's a private Slack group along with some mastermind sessions. Allows you to get connected to a community of innovators from around the world that you can not only contribute yourself, but you can also learn from and actually get help about whatever projects, innovations that you're currently working on. So again, check that out, theinnovators.community. You can also check out some of the tools we have over at innovation.tools. That is the online store where we share books, tools. The Killer Question card deck is over there. You can check all that out. And again, any of the profits that I receive from any of this actually gets used for the charity organization. So just so we're clear on that. So with that, we're going to wrap up today's show. Greatly appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Hopefully you found today challenging. Don't fall into that trap. Don't think about repeatability. Be a maverick. Change every time you're out there trying to innovate. Constantly innovate the way you innovate. And with that, we'll talk to you real soon. Don't let the innovation antibodies get you down. And we'll see you here next week at Killer Innovations.